Welcome to the 2025 AuthorTube Writing Conference. It's Sunday, last day of the show, so many of you have probably been here already, soaking up lots of knowledge over the course of the weekend. I am very excited to be presenting a topic near and dear to my heart today. We are going to be talking about serializing fiction for fun and profit. I have some experience in serializing fiction, and so I'm going to share with you everything that I have personally learned over the last few years, making my own stories available on a serialized basis. Just to set some expectations for everybody on how this presentation is going to work, I am talking about the mindset necessary to be a serializing fiction author. I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of serializing fiction, why you might want to do it, things you need to be aware of if you're going to get into that so that you know if it is or isn't right for you. In this presentation, I'm not going to be talking about all of the different platforms that you could go to serialize fiction. There are a lot of different options, and I will be naming some of those options. But rather than doing a deep dive on specific platforms and places to publish, I thought the better use of our time would be to give you skills, knowledge, things you need to think about that would apply to any and all of them. So that's kind of where we're going with things today. Who am I? So I thought I'd start by giving folks a little bit of my background to know who I am and why we're talking about things today. I am the marketing and community lead for Letterpress. We are proud to be banner sponsors for this year's show. And writing and serializing fiction is part of what helped me get my job. I started serializing Welcome to the Nexus on Kindle Vella when that launched on Amazon. And 6 to 8 months later, I became aware of Letterpress, started serializing on Letterpress as well. And that consistency in fiction releases really helped show that I was serious about writing, that I was keeping at it. And our founder, Scott, wanted an author in the company to help understand feature design, how things look from an author's point of view. Is it good? Is it bad? And also communicating with authors and understanding how authors think. So the fact that I was serializing a book quite literally helped me land my job, and I love my job. This is a dream job. That's kind of an out there scenario, but serializing can help you in ways you never would have expected. As I mentioned, it was serialized first on Kindle Vella and then Letterpress. The book is done now. It is officially going to be coming out on July 15th. Pre-orders are on Amazon. I also have the final version of the book available directly from me through Letterpress. It is a big, chonky, epic fantasy novel here. That's quite a meaty tome. And that entire thing, I was able to finish it because of serializing fiction. If you think about how crazy it is to write a novel that's 540 pages thick, if I had thought that is the task I set out for myself, I would have buckled under the strain of it. That's just too much to comprehend. But with serializing fiction, the question was, can I write a chapter a week? And the answer was, yes, I could. So I did it. And then I did it again. And then I did it again. And I did it over and over and over again until I had a complete finished draft. And then I could go through and revise everything. And now here I am with it today. And I am pleased to note this is as egotistical and as much of a flex as I will have through this entire presentation. But the book is not officially out yet. And I turned a profit on the book thanks to serialization before the first draft was even finished. Results are not typical there. And I will show you some examples later on of people who blow my earnings out of the water as far as serializing goes. But I did make $5,000 on this book while serializing it, which was enough to pay for Mibble Art to do a custom illustrated cover for the original, to do the sequel, and cover all of my upfront business expenses, trying to build a publishing company that sustains itself. So quite obviously from my own personal experience, that has helped set me up and make me very, very, very pro serializing fiction. But I do recognize that it's not going to be for everybody. This slide gets sticky. Bear with me. And I'm focusing on things. There will be Q&A time at the end of this session where I'll be looking at chat more closely. but I am focusing on kind of sharing my thoughts and ideas with people more than looking at the chat as we go here, because I'm running this show solo. I don't have any moderators. So starting out, what is serialized fiction? I wanted to give us some quick basic shared definitions to work from as we continue talking about things. Serialized fiction is a storytelling format where stories are released over time rather than all at once. And you can define what that period of time is. It might be a chapter a week. It might be 2 chapters a week. It could be bi-weekly. It is really going to vary based on you and the format. Serialized fiction is a very old storytelling format. There have been stories serialized in literary magazines, in newspapers. Arthur Conan Doyle serialized some of his Sherlock Holmes adventures in newspapers before they were collected and published as finished books. So this goes back a long time. It's not a new format, but the internet has made it more viable than ever for a larger group of people, because you can just go to your specific site or platform, and publishing can be handled automatically too. Some tools, you can say you specify a time, the chapter goes up when you want it to. So it's a very accessible way to tell fiction these days. Kind of mentioned it a bit, but it is very important to maintain a regular release schedule if you are going to serialize, so that your readers have an expectation of when they can get new chapters, and you want to be delivering on that. That is going to be the number one most important thing, I believe, for retaining readers. Serialized fiction runs on a lot of cliffhangers and hooks. It is not an absolute rule that you end every chapter on some form of a cliffhanger. That can get exhausting for readers. Every chapter is somebody's in mortal peril. It's like, okay, come on, how many times can you do that? But you can vary kind of cliffhangers and things that leave readers eager for the next chapter. It may not be kind of the literal cliffhanger mortal peril situation. It might be the presentation of a mystery. Like, you've been building up some reveal for a long time, and the chapter ends, leaving readers knowing that on the next chapter they're going to get the big reveal that they've been waiting for so long. It could be an answer to a question. You have to vary things up, but most chapters, you really want to have something in the ending that is going to inspire a reader to want to continue reading what comes next. That's even more important than with a finished novel, where somebody already bought the book, they already have the whole thing there, so their odds of continuing to the next chapter are going to be much higher than in serial fiction, because they already own the whole book. Serialized fiction can be more flexible with its plot progression, because serial is very long form in most cases. That gives you some flexibility to have the characters have some side quests or have multiple running plot lines, like a TV show might, that all culminate in something. You can go a little bit more big and extra with it than you traditionally can in a novel if you're writing something as a dedicated serial. But it's important to remember that if you're going to do that and kind of branch out the story very wide, you do still need to keep readers interested and not completely losing the plot on what's going on. And there's an expectation of length. If somebody is reading your serial, generally you could serialize a short story, you could serialize a novella, but if somebody's going to sit down and make time for a serial, then they are expecting, I would say at least a novel length. Serializing is a good format for series, just to keep releasing things. People who are going to show up early for a serial, they want to be around for a while. So I'm going to run through these super quick. Who can serialize? I'm going to turn off my webcam too so you can see all of these. I wanted to make a point that there's a lot of different kinds of authors who can serialize. There's not one specific box you need to fit into for this to be for you. So I just made up types. If you don't see yourself here, that is okay. This is not meant to be all-inclusive. But you've got Abigail, the artist type, who writes for personal artistic fulfillment. They're trying to learn and improve as a writer and do that with a community of other peoples. They could be writing fan fiction that, by its nature, they don't own the rights to, so couldn't monetize probably. These people are not commercially motivated, but they do it because the writing is fun and it's something they love to do. You've got your architect types like Ronnie, extreme plotters, craft meticulous notes. They're playing 4D chess, and they've got their whole universe figured out before they ever commit a word to the page. On the polar opposite end, the improvising abbeys are your discovery writers or your pantsers, making it up as they go, taking the story wherever their muse takes them. You've got your fan service writers who are primarily driven by reader engagement, often tailoring their content to maximize views, comments, monetization. They're the type of person, if a reader suggests that they really like a particular character or want to see a scene happen, that then it is, they're likely to weave that into their story. You've got your entrepreneurial types who maintain their newsletters, sales funnels, social media, and repackage serials into multiple formats. This one's kind of a joke. Your table crushing Terry, I joke, these are the people who write so many words and so long that if you were to print off their serial and put it on a table, the table would collapse under the weight of all of that paper. There are some authors who have been writing serials for years and years and years, where they might be 15 books long or longer if condensed into a series. And the sociologist type, this is kind of like the artist, where the art is most of the point. This would be exploring high concept science fiction, fantasy, societies, trying to think about high concepts and exploring those, and that is more important than specific characters or plot. So there's a lot of different features, or a lot of different kinds of authors who could benefit from writing serials. All right, I'll turn my webcam on here. And I see some questions in there. Like I said, there will be Q&A at the end, so I will go through chat and answer those towards the end of the stream. I just wanted to let you know I see those and I'm not ignoring them. And some of them might be answered by the session by the time we get there. So why would you want to serialize fiction? Well, number one is early feedback. By serializing fiction and making chapters available to readers, you can learn what readers do and don't like early on, potentially saving you hours of revision. And there is one very big example of this for me personally. When I was writing Welcome to the Nexus and serializing it, I have a character named Taco who is of a species called Octari. And the thing with Octari is they look like octopus, and they have an ability, when they touch you, they can communicate with you telepathically. They also have the ability to slither up onto a person's skin and appear like a tattoo in two-dimensional form. And so they have a symbiotic relationship with humanity. And there was going to be a 5 or 6 chapter stretch in the book where my main character, Serena, had to partner with an Octari named Taco. He was originally going to be a throwaway character just to help Serena through that brief section of the story arc. But all of my readers were like, we love Taco. Taco is such a great character. We love the dynamic between them. And I was having a blast writing him. And I realized I'd kind of struck gold with that character and that dynamic. And that having them go their separate ways and writing him out of the book when I had originally intended to would have been a huge mistake. And even with the novel finished now, I have a lot of people say that he's their favorite character. And so when I realized that, I was enjoying him and the readers were enjoying him too, I thought through how I could incorporate him into the story moving forward to keep that dynamic alive. And I never would have known that if I hadn't been serializing. If I'd finished a novel and then I was handing it off to beta readers, and beta readers said, Taco's a great character, why is he only in 5 chapters? It would have been such an enormous overhaul of the entire book to keep him and bring him into all of the sequences and all the scenes that I later had him in. And so, for me, that is an absolutely huge part of how serialization really helped make my book better and helped me see that I was onto something. Because like I've said here, it allows you to double down on things that are going well. I had one character as well that I thought was a very strong leader. People thought she was a little bit too mean and condescending. And so I had to look at how some of her dialogue was in those early chapters. And I kind of reread it and went, you know what? I think people are right. That's not hitting the way I want it to. And so I changed her character a little bit to bring it closer to how I wanted her to be. And I got to do that early on, where she'd only appeared in a handful of chapters versus having to fix her dialogue for the entire book. So I love serialization for that. It can be like beta readers, but even earlier on. Serialization can help grow your readership. I mean, if you're starting from zero, any person who is reading your book before it's published is one more reader than you had before. You're getting eyes on your book, whether that's a platform like Wattpad or Royal Road. Getting eyes, reading early drafts before you publish it. It could be subscription-based platforms, Letterpress, Patreon, Substack, you name it. It's another form to get your name out there and get eyeballs on your work before it lands on a retailer page. Some authors use a free to premium pipeline, which is, again, just fire hosing your content out there on free sites, trying to get as many people looking at it as possible, under the knowledge that most will not subscribe to your work. But the more people who look at it, the more people could potentially be signing up for a subscription and supporting you as you go. You just have to understand the ratio is going to be low. If you get 5 subscribers for every 100 readers that you have on a free site, then you're doing very, 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 very well. Audience retention is another good point in serializing fiction. If you've got eyeballs on your story, you want to keep them there. So think about Netflix. And I know I'm kind of blocking just a bit of the text, but think about Netflix and their shows and how there can be a year-long gap between seasons in a show, and they release all of the episodes at once so somebody can binge an entire season in a day, and then they have to wait a year to get the next season. How many people are going to even remember about that they watched that show a year later or go, oh, I need to tune in for a new season, right? Netflix has to do a lot of efforts reminding people that their own shows exist to get them to show up and watch again after those long gaps. And that can be the same thing in our lives as authors. If you publish a book and then you are going to need a year to write the next one, that's an entire year for people to forget about your books and your stories. How do you keep yourself top of mind and remind them, hey, want to come back or you want to stay involved in my series and my universe? By serializing. Somebody has already finished book 1 in your series and you go, hey, still excited about this series? Book 2 is in progress. You can go and read it here. And that helps keep people, keeps your brand aware, makes you have to do just a little bit less marketing, somewhat. And it also shows that, hey, you are serious about writing. You're not going anywhere. You're continuing to produce the book. Here's the proof that you're continuing to write the book. You are releasing new chapters all of the time. So I think just even if you don't have a lot of people actively reading it in the serialization phase, having it out there where people can publicly see you are still working on the book, new stuff is coming out, that can build trust in readers, make them feel more confident purchasing the first book, even if they don't want to touch the second one until it's available in a final format. And of course, monetization. It wouldn't be serializing fiction for fun and profit if we didn't talk about monetization. We all like to make some money, especially on a book that we're still working on and may have publishing costs to incur in the future. And so, yes, it is possible to become profitable on a book and have all of your expenses covered before you even finished writing or publishing said book. There are sites like Ko-Fi that you can use to set up a tip jar, which is not necessarily the same thing as a recurring subscription. But if you have your content out for free early, you can say, hey, if you're enjoying this, you can go here to tip me some money. That's going to be inconsistent, and you can't rely on that for any specific, income. But anybody who throws some dollars your way, that's more dollars than you had. And I don't think any of us would complain about that, right? There's the free to premium pipelines, like I said before. Publish on free serial sites, make your work available for free, and then you're letting your readers know, hey, you can subscribe on Letterpress if you like what you're reading. You can subscribe on Patreon, follow me on Substack. Wherever you've got things set up, you can divert the people who've been reading for free to subscribe and support you in additional details in another format. This one, paper chapters and chapter bundles. That is more for, I'll turn off my camera for a second there so you can see that. That's more for serial fiction apps than most subscription platforms. But Later Press offers it. There are some places you can set a price for, I want to give you 10 chapters in one shot, and that's going to cost you $5 or $2.50. You know, there's some kind of X and Y equation there on how much someone is spending and how much someone is getting. That is one way that you can go with things. And monthly and annual subscriptions. The text is partially blocked, but monthly subscriptions, we all know what those are. I think readers, with the creator economy the way it is, people are pretty habituated to that concept, so I don't think I need to explain that one very heavily. But now here on screen, you've got multiple examples that people are having success serializing fiction. On the top left here, we have an article from The New Yorker that was written all about professional writers and passive amateurs writing and publishing and making money using Substack as their platform of choice. Down here, author talking about webnovel.com and that they made an average of almost 19,000 Canadian dollars a month using Webnovel as their platform. And I've got two examples of Patreon here. Pirate Abba is the author of The Wandering Inn. I took this from Graphtreon. Not super aware of the level of accuracy on this site, especially because there's an earnings rating of $16,000 to $50,000 per month. That's a pretty wide variance. Even if we take the lowest, I don't think any of us are going to complain about making $16,000 a month writing one series. And all of the Wandering Inn books eventually did make it, over to Amazon. They're available in published, finished form, where Pirate Ab is able to make even more money on those. And Travis Devrel, aka Shirtaloon, the author of He Who Fights with Monsters, reported earning $28,532 a month on Patreon. Very comfortably full-time living as an author numbers there. They are the outliers. This is the top of the top. Not the standard experience for most of us, but it is important to realize that these people exist, and therefore that is proof that it is possible. That's a lot. That's way more success than I have seen, but I just want you to see that the sky is the limit, and that serializing fiction has made some authors some significant money. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows when you are serializing fiction. There are some downsides and issues that you need to be aware of if you're going to get into this so that you can move forward with eyes wide open. One of those big ones is deadlines. If you are going to serialize fiction, you are making a commitment to your readers that you are going to deliver chapters on a consistent basis. And by that very nature, that means there's going to be deadlines. If you are releasing a chapter a week, then every week you need to have a chapter ready to give out to your readers. So this is going to work best for people who are either deadline driven or capable of working around deadlines. If deadlines give you severe anxiety and you don't think you are able to commit to a consistent release schedule, then serializing fiction may not be for you, because if you cannot consistently release, you could still do it. I'm certainly not going to tell you not to release a chapter here and there as it's ready for your dedicated fan base and people who are going to support you. But if your goal is to gain traction and grow a readership, then I do honestly really believe that consistency is important, and so you're going to be working with deadlines. And related to deadlines, burnout. You're kind of creating a content treadmill for yourself to be continuing to write and continuing to publish. And for me, that was one of the best things about serializing, is I needed the pressure of a deadline, and I needed to feel like I was going to be letting other people down if I did not produce and publish on time. For me personally, that pressure was a very good thing to keep my butt in the chair and keep writing and keep working. And so for me, that was a good thing. But constantly feeling like you need to write, produce, 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 that is a recipe for burnout. And so that is something to be mindful of and be aware of when you're getting into serialization. When we get to tips and strategies and best practices, I will be talking about some things you can do to help minimize this burnout or alleviate your risk for it. But you do want to be aware that that exists. Continuity errors can be a big problem in serialization because once you have published something, at least for that draft of a book, what you just published is basically canon. And so you can run into problems if you haven't plotted things out ahead enough where you might write yourself into a corner and go, oh crap, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this situation. And then you need to come up with a retcon to keep the story moving or some kind of deus ex machina to get yourself out of jail. And then you're going to have a lot of revision to do later to smooth things out so the story flows better. Or if you realize that you have set up a massive contradiction, let's say you're in chapter 20 and something that happened in chapter 10 cannot have happened that way for the rest of the story to make sense. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, you could go back to chapter 10, edit, revise that to be correct with your new understanding of how the universe works. But now you have to communicate to all of your readers, hey, chapter 10 is completely different now. Please go back and reread chapter 10 before continuing. And some people might do that, some not. Otherwise, you're going to have people confused about why things changed. So you have to be mindful of that. And if you don't have a detailed plot or an outline as you're starting, then I would recommend taking notes of the story and what's happening as you go, trying to think ahead as much as possible, and making notes of all of the fine details to try to help save yourself and make it less likely that you would walk into a continuity situation. Pacing can also be an issue. Like I said, with hooks and cliffhangers, readers want to have a sense of forward momentum, and they want to feel like the story is going somewhere. And that doesn't mean action, action, action all the time, that you can never have slower character moments. You certainly can. Serials are going to have their ebbs and flows, but you want to be aware of how those are being staggered out. You don't want to have, too much relaxation all at once where people might start to feel like the story stalled, it's not going anywhere, or am I wading through filler here? So you have to kind of be mindful of the pacing to make sure that you're keeping things moving along and that readers are going to remain interested. And you need to realize that you're playing a long game. As I'd mentioned earlier, serial readers have an expectation of length. Some readers may not even take a chance or start on your serial until they have seen that there's a certain number of chapters available. And that's going to vary from reader to reader. But there are plenty of readers out there who see if you don't have at least 10 chapters up or at least 20 chapters up, they might wonder, are you even serious about this? Is this a dead serial? They don't want to get invested in an abandoned project. And so you could be writing and publishing several chapters before you get any traction. And that is very, very normal. So you don't want to put out 10 chapters and not have a lot of traction on it and think that you're failing. In the world of serials, 10 chapters is like a prologue. You're just getting started and you want to keep going. You cannot give up on that early. Pros and cons of serial fiction from the reader's perspective. I wanted to talk about this because if we are going to publish serial fiction and put it out there for people to read, I think it's important to have some understanding from the reader's perspective. What are they getting out of this? Why would they want to read a serial? So I wanted to list some pros and cons as to why people might want to read your books early. On the pro side, it's a shorter time commitment per reading session. If I hand somebody this book and I say, welcome to the Next, this is a great book, you should read it. That's a time commitment. That's 540 pages. Whereas if they look at just a 5 to 10 page chapter, okay, can I read 10 pages in a week? Sure. It's a lot less intimidating of a prospect. And, over time that adds up until you realize, hey, I've read this huge, thick novel. But in the beginning, it's a lot more manageable. It doesn't feel as intimidating to get into. And it's ongoing entertainment. If somebody enjoys your universe, then the excitement of a serial is knowing that this is a world you could keep dipping your toes into week after week for months or even years. And so a lot of people really love having that something to look forward to keep coming back. The characters feel like they're friends. And with the potential for community interaction, other readers start to feel like your friends too. Fans might start theory crafting. Hey, what's going to happen next in the story? Where do we go from here? And as an author too, readers can develop an emotional investment in the author and a story. When there's communication between an author and their fans, that helps build up a sense of community and keeps people excited to continue reading and investing themselves in a story. But there can be cons from the reader's side too. Waiting between chapter releases. By the very nature of serial, it's stories told over time. And some people don't want to wait. Netflix has normalized binging. I want the whole season at once. Or finished books have existed for centuries. I want to read the whole book at once. Let me know when it's done. And so there are some readers you're just not going to win over by the very nature of the format and having to wait between chapters. And that's okay. We know that's what we're signing up for when we're serializing. Serializing fiction can also create a fragmented experience where readers lose the plot. So, for example of what I mean of this is if you have a character show up in chapter 15 and they don't show up again until chapter 25, and you are, so you've got a 10 chapter break in there, and let's say you're releasing a chapter a week, then this character has not shown up in 10 weeks real time from the reader's perspective, and readers could forget about that character or what was going on. If you've got these grand epic plot lines and there hasn't been movement on that plot for several months real time, readers can forget what happened and then get confused, struggle to follow along. This is something that I'll be talking about in best practices as well. There are ways to counter that, but you need to kind of be mindful as you're writing a serial that due to the real-time nature of its releases, knowledge retention by your readers is not going to be as great as it would be if they are sitting down and reading a finished book and can just keep moving through it. And abandoned stories, I don't know if this is true or if this is a number that gets bandied about the internet so much that we all have taken it to assume it's true. But anecdotally, what I hear a lot is that for every 100 people who say they want to write a novel, only 3 people are actually going to finish it. And if you expand that number out to 1,000 authors, then for every 1,000 people who say they want to finish a book, 30 will actually do so, and only 6 will actually publish. Again, I don't know if those numbers are actually true, but that's what you hear across the internet all the time. The point being in bringing that up is that applies to serials too, and that there are a lot of people who start a serial with very good intentions. They are excited about a story or a universe, and they can't get themselves over the finish line. And so there are a lot of abandoned stories out there in serial fiction land. And that is another reason why it's such a long game, and readers can want to see a lot of chapters from you before investing, is because they don't want to feel like their time was wasted getting super interested into a story only to find out that the author gave up on it and it's not going to be continuing. So that establishing your credibility and consistency as a serial fiction author and as an author in general is going to be very helpful to getting people over their fear of abandoned stories and their fear of committing to you. And I'm not going to belabor this point. Inconsistent quality. In the world of writing and fiction, quality can be all over the place, especially in serial fiction as people are learning and establishing and growing their craft. Some readers understand that early chapters of a serial can be rough and that authors are going to improve their skills over time. But, some readers want a more polished thing, and you never know what you're diving into necessarily with a serial and a new author until you've started. So 10 best practices for writing and serializing fiction. Here's what I would recommend based on everything I have learned over the last few years. Number 1, have a sense of direction. Where is your story going? And by this, I do not mean that you need to know the entire plot before you start. But if somebody is going to ask you, what is your story about? Or what is the point of it? Or why should I read it? You should have answers to those very basic sorts of questions. I'm writing a portal fantasy. You should read it because there's epic battles and because the characters are very flawed but fundamentally kind people who are punching way above their weight. There's a grand sense of adventure. There's some humor. I want people to feel uplifted and energized by reading it. And I have the shape in my head as to the long-term arc as to where what the big bads are and what they're fighting. So, I have that sense of direction. And I recommend, even if you don't have all of the details, you want to understand that much before you start. And set expectations with your readers right up front. When should they expect new chapters? Tell them, I'm releasing a chapter every week on Tuesday, every Saturday, every 2 weeks on Friday. Whatever it is, you decide that. Communicate that in big, bold letters to your readers by your newsletter, by the blurb or the description of your book, wherever you're publishing it. Make it abundantly clear to readers when they can expect more from you. And then follow through on that, which is going to be one of the points too. Before you hit the publish button, I strongly recommend knowing your writing pace and building a buffer. So think about, what does a typical writing session look like for you? How long is it? How many words are you writing? How long is your average chapter? If your average chapter is 2,000 to 3,000 words, can you write that much in a week? Do you write that much in a day? And you can have 2 or 3 writing sessions like that in a week. Understand what your production flow is and build a release schedule around what you feel comfortable that you can hit. That is completely up to you to decide, and set yourself up for success there. Don't make promises to folks that you cannot keep. Consistency is more important than speed. While I do recommend putting out at least 1 chapter a week, if you can only do one chapter every 2 weeks, it is better to do that than promise something faster and then not deliver on it. So whatever promises you are setting, consistency matters more than speed. And like that I said, number 4, meet expectations, deliver when you say you will. 5, this is something specific to serialization that I would not think you need to do so much if you are writing something specifically for a book. And that is to recap and reinforce key information as needed, even if that information is going to get deleted later. For example, a character that has a 10-chapter gap between their appearances. If that character hasn't shown up for a couple months from the reader's perspective, it may be worth describing them again to refresh your readers what they look like. If it's been a while since a specific plot point has been touched upon, you may want to write a paragraph to remind readers what your characters are questing for, or why 2 characters are mad at each other if that conflict hasn't been relevant for a while. Those passages may get deleted out of the final book as redundant information that doesn't need to be there, but in the context of a serial, that is necessary to keep readers grounded in the scene, understanding what's going on, and flowing with the story. So that may involve some extra writing on your part, and sometimes it's not necessarily fun to be writing things that are going to get stripped out of the final book, but for a reader satisfaction point of view, it can be very helpful to keep that in there. I recommend engaging with your readers if you're going to be writing a serial. Do not be afraid of reader feedback. Do not be afraid of reader comments. As I've said, from my own personal experience, some of my best and most transformative changes in my manuscript came because I was receptive to reader feedback and I heard from them what they loved. I heard from them what was not landing. And so I made changes accordingly because, I kind of put my ego aside for a minute, listened to what they were saying, thought about why people were saying that, and then I made changes. So I would very much recommend treating your serial readers as if they're beta readers. They may not be as, literary, they may not have as much literary knowledge, but, these are your potential customers too down the line. It's worth listening to what they have to say. And being receptive to feedback, as I said. Plan a satisfying ending. And you don't need to know your ending in advance. You just really need to know the direction you're going. But the closer you get to what you think your ending is, then it is time to start planning your end game and how everybody gets their happily ever after. You know what happens if readers have invested so much time and energy into reading your story, they deserve a satisfying payoff at the end. So you want to make sure you're thinking about that as you're going, even if you're not particularly close to the end at this point in time. Number 9, do not expect the platform you use to do marketing for you. Even so-called discovery platforms that have algorithms and things out there to promote certain stories, you don't want to be beholden to the whims of an algorithm and whatever they decide is the flavor of the day. You do need to have some thoughts in mind, especially if you're trying to monetize this. How are you bringing awareness to the fact that your serial exists? Are you building a newsletter? Are you setting out your newsletter subscribers to let them know there's a new book available or new chapters? Are you using social media, TikTok, Twitter, whatever, to get the word out and drive traffic towards your site? You don't need to do this as aggressively as you might marketing a finished book, because the serial audience is going to be different than a finished book audience. But the point is, I think, if you are trying to grow it and monetize it, serialization is not set it and forget it. You do want to continue promoting it, making sure people know it exists and driving traffic to it. And number 10, multiple points of entry. This is a more advanced later down the road thought, but if you have a serial that's going for a very, very long time, if you've been writing this for 5 years, then you get to the opposite problem of people wanting to see a certain number of chapters before they even start reading. If you've been going for 5 years and dropping a chapter a week, then readers might go, oh my God, it's so daunting a task to catch up on 5 years. I'm never going to catch up. And so as you are further along, you may want to think about writing a side story or a little mini series of something that can lead into where you are currently at with your serial, or write like summaries of the story so far and character profiles, things to help catch readers up so they don't feel like they have to read years 1 through 5 to enjoy what you're writing right now. But that is a very down the road problem that you would have after you've been writing for a while, but it is something worth keeping in mind. Now, where can you publish? Again, I'm not going to belabor the point because we're talking more theory here than specific places. But if free is fine, then there's places like Royal Road, Wattpad. Archive of Our Own is mostly dedicated to fan fiction, but I believe you can release other original works there too. If you want to monetize, there's plenty of platforms, just to name a handful. Our platform, Letterpress, Patreon, Substack, Ream, Ko-Fi. There's lots and lots of options out there on where you can go to monetize your fiction while you're writing it. And I'm doing back-to-back sessions here. If you want to stick around for my second hour of streaming, I will be doing a deep dive into Letterpress, showing off the platform and how specifically we can be used by many different types of authors, including serial fiction authors. And I will show you exactly how I would set things up if I was going to be serializing on Letterpress, which is what I'm going to be doing with my sequel. So that is going to be our next hour's presentation. One thing I would tell folks, beware serial fiction apps. And I'm not talking about like Substack or Patreon or anything. I'm talking about apps that are very much like they're app focused. They're based on phones. They may have limited website presence. And these are the type of platforms that make you sign a contract to publish with them. I just went to Writer Beware and I did a search on serialized fiction apps. And there were multiple examples in there of companies with questionable contract terms. So if you are approached by a serial fiction app and they say, hey, we love your work, we want you to publish with us, blah, 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 pay attention to their contracts and find out how all of that is going to work before signing anything, because there are some reputable ones, but you can have a bad time as well. For example, read the platform's terms of service and always read a contract before signing it if a contract is required to publish with a platform. Letterpress, we don't have any exclusivity clauses. We don't have any contracts. People can sign up, publish a book, unpublish a book whenever you want. That is completely up to you. What happened to my other picture? Okay, there we go. So I have a personal experience with this. Okay, I was publishing the Planner Gate series on Kindle Vella for several months, and this was after I'd started with them, but before I got hired by Letterpress. I found out about a company called Mithril Fiction, or Mithril. I think it's supposed to be a play on, the mythical element mithril, or the ore. They had suggested, hey, your story looks good. We would love it if you publish with us. And so I sent them some emails about, okay, what does it mean to be a partner with you guys? And they wanted 5 years of exclusivity on that platform. They're like, you can already have what is live on Kindle Vella there, but all new chapters we want exclusive to us. And when I asked them about payment structures, like how do you pay people? When do you pay people? What is, what marketing are you doing? What is your marketing budget? Basically any and every kind of question I could think of to go, why would I want to be exclusive to you when even Amazon is not asking me for exclusivity with Kindle Vella? They just demanded that it was behind a paywall. And as soon as I started asking them some serious, tough questions, I got ghosted. Fast forward to today, and I took this screenshot on the left on Thursday. I'm realizing my webcam's blocking the other one. Okay, please check email. Hard to do while streaming. Sorry. When I checked for Mithril's website on Thursday, I got this: DNS not found, diagnosing the problem. When I did a Google search on them today, their site didn't even show up in the front page of Google traffic. And when I looked for their presence on Twitter, it said they hadn't posted. I think I wasn't logged in, but when I looked again today, they hadn't posted since 2023. So my assumption is that platform is gone. So if I had signed with them, I would have been looking at a 5-year exclusivity clause that died 1 or 2 years in, unknown support and publishing, wondering how rights reversion is going to work. It would have been a mess. So thankfully, I did not have to worry about any of that because I had been good about, asking questions beforehand. And so that basically covers the points I wanted to raise about serializing fiction here. And we've got, I went through that a little bit faster than I thought I did, which is good. Practice makes perfect. A little bit less rambling. But I'm going to take a look at chat here. If folks have questions for me, feel free to put those in the chat here. And I'm going to scroll back up and try to answer as many questions as I can from folks as we've got time here. I don't have a fancy setup for putting chat on the screen, unfortunately. I'm still figuring things out from the video production and on my own side here. But yeah, if you could put Q at the beginning of your message so I see that it's a question, I would appreciate that. I'm trying to find some of the earlier ones here. Six Cats Press. If you have a full-time job and can't reasonably commit to write consistently, is it a good idea to write the whole book and then release parts of it over time? That is a fair question. I think it depends on what's your goal. What do you want to get out of serialization? If you already have a full book done, you could treat that as like an early access strategy, and then let people know the full book will be available on X date. If you are uncertain about certain parts of the book and feel like a good amount of revision might be needed, then you could serialize it as a way to get more beta readers than you might otherwise, reading it and getting feedback, and then seeing are these people raising any issues that you need to address in revision. And if you can't commit to a consistent release schedule, then, have the harder it is for you to commit to a release schedule, the bigger a buffer you need to have if you want to do that. So if you've got most of the book done or all of the book already done, then you're going to be less worried about the deadline issue because you're way ahead of things. and can then release chapters on a manner that you're going to be able to hit because you've already got most or all of the book done. So I hope that helps answer that question. Penumbra Mine question. I serialized Relic of Time War and it went well, but I need to hold the physical books. Do you have recommendations for serialized writers to scratch that itch? So the way I'm understanding your question is you're talking about your own work, and that you feel the need to hold it in your hands like a physical book like this. And I'm not treating that as a commercial, you need to sell it type thing. One thing you could do, I think the cheapest and easiest thing to do is if you have an account with Kindle Direct Publishing, you can create a paperback there and then just be very sure not to publish it and upload whatever you have of the manuscript so far and generate a proof copy and order a proof copy of your own book through them. Because I found if all you want is a proof copy for yourself to hold and assess and review, they seem to be the cheapest place to do it. But again, just make sure you do not actually publish the thing. There were two different points where I did that for my book as I was serializing it. At about the 50% way mark of the first draft, I ordered a proof for myself because I just wanted to feel that tangible sense as to how far I'd come. And then when I finished my first draft, I ordered another one that was actually, it was 8.5 by 11, double spaced. It was not meant to represent the final book, but I used that as a print proof copy to go through and start making line edits and fixes and looking for typos and things. And so I used things that way. So I think that would be the cheapest and easiest way I would handle that. And do I have a recommendation for book lengths for serialized fiction? Are there limits? I've seen normal book lengths and some with hundreds of chapters. That is going to be up to you as a writer. Serial readers like longer. It also depends on how you're going to, if you're going to re-release it in other formats later, then you might say, okay, this is the end of the book, and then you may continue on the serial from there, or you may create a new serial and say, hey, this is book 2 or season 2. I think the great thing about serializing is that there's so much variety in how you can go about doing that. Leon Newton, platforms like Wattpad, Serial Box, and Radish have shown success with serialized fiction in certain genres. How do you think authors' site versus Substack, etc., stack up in terms of serialization mediums? There's pros and cons to both. The pros to those platforms that you named is going to be that they have a built-in audience. So if you publish with them, you are tapping into that audience to get eyeballs on your work. The downside is going to be that you need to play by their terms and conditions. And if you're able to monetize through them, they are going to take their own cut, diminishing some of your earnings. So it can be easier to get some eyeballs on a platform that has a built-in following. The advantage to using your own site is you control the experience. So you can set your price, you can set your subscription terms, and if you use Letterpress, we capture all of the purchase data on people who've purchased from you. So you would have email addresses, you would know who your buyers are. So if you ever decide, hey, Letterpress isn't for me, I'm going to unpublish, take all my books down, you would still know all the people who purchased from you, so you could email them and say, hey, I'm moving all of my fiction over to XYZ. Whereas if you're on Wattpad or Railroad, or even I don't think Patreon lets you do this, if you leave their ecosystem, you don't know who was supporting you along the way. You do not have the ways to directly contact them and update them on your writing and your career in the ways that you would taking charge of things through your own personal sites and experiences. So I hope that helped answer that. How will you handle pacing to avoid frustrating readers? Will you have recurring themes or motifs throughout the series? List strategies for character growth, development throughout the series. As far as pacing goes, there's a little bit of instinct involved and a little bit of knowledge of traditional plot structures. But it gets muddied a bit in terms of serial because it can be so long form. But you want to have peaks and valleys. You know, you want to be escalating towards a conflict, have a conflict happen, give your characters some time to cool off, process what happened. There's going to be a bit of a transition into gearing up for whatever the next conflict is or where the story's going. And you need to give all of those moments room to breathe. You don't want to just keep, rushing through them. So you have to, I am unfortunately not a great plotter. I'm figuring out a lot of that sort of stuff as I go. I don't know that I can give you a great answer that would handle all of the different possibilities with that. Penumbra question: does Letterpress allow external links to an author's website and other books at the end of chapters? So I'll give you a quick answer to that now, and then I'm going to cover things in more detail during the next session going over Letterpress. Specifically, we do allow authors to link in your profile as an author. You can link to an external site, and you can write a bio, mentioning things about yourself. You could put links to relevant materials in the chapters, but our reader does not support links natively. So somebody would have to manually enter that link to actually go to the site. They can't just click it and go somewhere else. So I would say that's not a terms of service violation. That's something you can do. Just outside of the couple spaces we allow you for links in your profile, our site isn't currently built or optimized for that. And I think I skipped one of your other questions. How much of the marketing falls on an author with Letterpress? I know Vela, all of the marketing falls on the author. Letterpress is built as a direct sales first site, so I am very honest in telling people to walk into it with the expectation that the overwhelming majority of the eyeballs on your work would be traffic that you brought there yourself. So you would be needing to focus on a lot of marketing. And that is one of the big reasons that Letterpress takes 0% on your direct sales. We know that you had to do a lot of work to get the traffic there. We want you to be rewarded for that. At Letterpress, we only take a cut when our features led to somebody finding your book and making a sale. And I will be showing that off in more detail in a few minutes when we transition over to the Letterpress specific session. But we got a couple minutes left. Were there any questions I skipped? If so, please repost in the chat here, and I'd be happy to answer those. Went through things a little faster than I thought. I'm looking forward to reading the chat history and your comments and everything afterwards. It's very difficult for me to maintain a coherent narrative, talking things through and reading chat at the same time. Question from Devon, I think I skipped. I think you mentioned in one of your newsletters that you wrote some chapters ahead of time so you weren't scrambling all the time. Yes. Yes, before the next stream. Okay, I will check my email before the next stream. Thank you. So, yeah, when I was writing and serializing it, for the first probably 2 dozen chapters almost, I was writing by the seat of my pants and dropping those every week. But the longer I spent in the story, the better I was able to get about seeing what was coming down the tunnel. And so I never got more than 3 chapters ahead. I never had as big a buffer as I wanted to, and I'm probably going to have that struggle again with the sequel. But I could get 2 weeks ahead pretty consistently so that I wasn't scrambling to hit that release deadline. And that made life a lot easier where, if I was feeling sick for a couple days, if something came up, I had room to breathe and I wasn't going to be worrying about whether or not I could hit my own self-imposed deadline. Okay. But I think it looks like that was all the questions we have, and it's 11:59. So I am going to be shutting down the stream here and taking a short couple-minute break to reset for the next stream. Stay tuned on this channel, and up next we are going to have a deep dive into Letterpress as a platform. I'm going to show you how I use it and all of the different ways that you could use Letterpress for selling books, for serializing fiction, for doing a lot of different things that you can use with our platform and how flexible it is. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Glad my cover looks great. Appreciate all of your kind words and your comments. And I will be back in